Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Komicher, Instructional Development Specialist with the Learning and Organizational Development Unit at Ohio State University Extension.
Hi, and I'm Jared Morrison, an organization development consultant with the same unit at Ohio State University Extension. And we are here today to talk about engaged teaching, the denouement. And denouement is actually a French word that it means the final part of a play, movie, or narrative in which the strands of the plot are drawn together, matters are explained and resolved. So that's one of my favorite words. I like to tie that in here um, to bring all the loose ends together. So we're going to break this piece of engaged online teaching into three segments, and that's your conclusion, your follow-up, and then reporting at the end. So as we look at that conclusion, we're talking about the conclusion still in your session or meeting or class, where you're going to want to go through a few key points. And so to start, you want to review any main points of your content for your learners to make sure that you've addressed them all, and the objectives that you stated in your lesson. And sometimes it's nice to ask, did we achieve those, and get some kind of group consensus, or if you have your own method, but make sure that you relate back to those objectives, review them, and make sure that you addressed each of them. In addition to objectives and main points, you want to look at any key information that you don't want your learners to lose, and kind of readdress those and make sure that they really are sunk in with your learners. And then you also want to look at any main takeaways, action items, or anything that your learners were supposed to kind of write down and key in on for themselves. You also want to look into dialogue and feedback. So you can open up some Q&A if your learners have questions and need some things addressed, especially if there's time. You can look for general comments, concerns, or feedback on the session that they can speak aloud or chat into the chat method. And then you can also consider a formal evaluation, which Amy will talk about a little bit more here in a few minutes. You want to consider a primer that you go into, and that can be for if it's a multi-session topic, you can talk about the upcoming session for this specific topic. And if it's not, if it's more of a one-off program or class for learners, you can always offer information about any other upcoming sessions from yourself or your team unit or somebody else that you kind of respect in a learning space. So make sure to prime for some future options for engagement. And then you'll want to move into completing that session. So this is some of those logistical things. So you want to stop a recording. If you are recording, save your chat, any whiteboards or annotations, anything that you may have, you can make sure to grab all of those. And once you're past that, securely close that session and move on to your next one. So we will now talk about some follow-up that you'll want to do with your learners now that will happen after you've closed your meeting to keep them kind of a little bit engaged. So first and foremost, you want to thank them. It's always great that people tune into your information and you thank them for being engaged. I sometimes like to add a specific note if there was a funny or specific event that happened within that one session, so that I can kind of relate back to that specific group, and then invite them for questions that they can continue to follow up with you, or if they need some further things clarified. So, yeah.
An additional piece of follow up on your session is going to be the evaluation and feedback component. And so at this point, after you've concluded your recording and formal conclusion to your session, you'll also want to post any links to surveys or evaluations that you have, and be sure to plan how you're going to share additional resources that might be something like a shared cloud storage space folder or attachments in a follow-up email, and additional links or resources that may have been brought up during the session or promised during the session. So either drop those in something like a chat space or a follow-up note to all of your participants through the registration you've collected or a class roster. But keep those items in mind to make sure that all components of the follow-up are handled accordingly. And after you've completed all of the promised items, such as evaluation and feedback surveys and links and everything else, you're still going to want to make sure you capture attendance or polls for reporting. The reporting is sometimes a really important piece for funding agencies or grants or even your own improvement of courses. So be sure to capture any of that information before you leave. As an example, in Zoom, you need to save the chat file. Different web platforms work in different ways, so just be sure you're aware of that consideration before the data is lost, because you will probably need that for some sort of report, even if it's just for yourself. So keep those items in mind for evaluation and analysis to improve future sessions.
All right, thanks, Amy. So that did bring us through those three pieces. Again, conclusion, so that you can wrap up everything at the end, refer back to your objectives and make sure everything was addressed. Your follow-up to thank your learners and provide them with any resources that were promised or requested in that session or segment, and then reporting. So again, you can do grants or speak with supervisors, funders, or as Amy mentioned, improve your own teaching or sessions for the future. So those three pieces, and that will really tie up all the information and really allow you to feel good about that session, make sure your learners took all your main points away with them, and move on to the next piece that you're working on. So as we conclude here today, I wanted to thank our colleague, Danae Wolf, who put together this slide template, accessible in terms of color and readability. And I also included our email addresses for myself and for Amy, in case you'd like to engage with us or ask questions after watching this video. So thank you and happy teaching.